Blackhead prevention starts with understanding that blackheads are not simple dirt trapped in the skin, and they are not a sign that someone is unclean, but a specific kind of clogged pore formed when excess sebum, dead skin cells, and tiny bits of daily residue collect inside the opening of a hair follicle, and the material near the top oxidizes when exposed to air, turning dark. So the most effective prevention strategy is not harsh scrubbing, squeezing, or trying to force the skin into quick perfection, but building a calm, repeatable routine that keeps pores clearer over time while protecting the skin barrier from irritation. The first habit that matters most is gentle cleansing, usually once in the morning and once at night, with a mild cleanser that removes sweat, sunscreen, makeup, and excess oil without leaving the face tight, stinging, squeaky, or stripped, because skin that feels aggressively clean is often skin that has been pushed too far. And once the barrier becomes irritated, the face may become redder, rougher, more reactive, and sometimes even shinier later as it tries to compensate, which can make blackheads appear worse rather than better. One of the most useful ingredients for people who are prone to blackheads is salicylic acid, a beta-hydroxy acid that is oil-soluble and able to move inside the pore lining where oil and compacted debris tend to collect, helping loosen buildup gradually, and it usually works best when it is used regularly in a routine the skin can tolerate rather than aggressively for a few days out of frustration. Retinoids can also be very helpful because they support healthier cell turnover and reduce the tendency of dead skin cells to remain trapped inside pores, though they should be introduced slowly, especially for sensitive skin, because too much too soon may lead to dryness, peeling, irritation, and discouragement before any real improvement has had time to appear. Moisturizer still matters, even if the skin feels oily, because oily skin can also be dehydrated. And when the barrier becomes dry or irritated, the face often becomes harder to manage, more reactive to active ingredients, and less comfortable overall. So, a lightweight, non-comedogenic moisturizer is usually part of prevention rather than something to avoid. Sunscreen is equally important, especially if exfoliating acids or retinoids are part of the routine, because sun exposure can make redness, irritation, and lingering post-acne marks more visible, and many treatment ingredients can make the skin more sensitive to light, so a lightweight fluid, gel, or lotion. Sunscreen is often easier for acne-prone skin to tolerate than a thick, greasy formula. If makeup is worn, it should be removed thoroughly before bed, and if heavy hair products such as pomades, oils, waxes, or thick styling creams are used, they should be kept away from the forehead and temples as much as possible, because repeated transfer in those areas may contribute to clogged pores in some individuals. Another major rule is to stop treating the face like a small emergency that needs constant correction by hand, because frequent touching, picking, squeezing, scratching, and scraping often creates more inflammation than improvement, and can leave redness or marks that last longer than the blackhead itself. Rough physical scrubs and abrasive cleansing brushes are also commonly overused, even though blackhead-prone skin usually responds better to controlled chemical exfoliation than repeated friction. After sweating heavily or exercising, it helps to rinse or cleanse the face. So sweat, oil, sunscreen, and dust are not left sitting on the skin for hours. And it is also sensible to keep pillowcases, hats, phones, and anything else that regularly touches the face reasonably clean, not because those things alone cause blackheads, but because reducing extra grime and friction supports calmer skin overall. Food and lifestyle patterns can affect different people differently, so it is wiser to notice patterns than to panic over one single meal. And good sleep, lower stress, gentle shaving habits, and avoiding the temptation to overload the face with too many trendy products often do more good than dramatic home remedies. In daily life, the most effective blackhead prevention routine is usually boring in the best possible way. Something simple enough to repeat for months, such as a gentle cleanser, a light moisturizer, and sunscreen in the morning, then a gentle cleanser, one treatment product on selected nights, and moisturizer in the evening, because prevention is usually built through patience, repetition, and barrier protection rather than force, which was exactly the kind of advice Franklin Mercer would have respected immediately if the subject had been hedge clippers, garden hose nozzles, or pancake batter consistency, but not if it involved patience in any other category of life. Because Franklin Mercer, 70 years old, retired from 37 years of supervising a regional appliance repair warehouse in Ohio, believed in straight driveways, labeled drawers, and the principle that if a thing rattled, squeaked, dripped, or leaned, then a responsible adult should either fix it or stop talking about it. And if anyone had told him that the most entertaining year of his retirement would begin with a muffin-related misunderstanding and somehow end with him riding through a small-town parade in a borrowed golf cart while wearing a straw boater hat and shouting directions at a llama, he would have said that sounded like a minor civic failure, not a life plan. Franklin lived alone in a pale yellow ranch house with dark green shutters, a narrow porch, and a garage so organized that neighborhood children assumed it was some kind of museum for practical men. Every extension cord was looped correctly. Every screwdriver had a designated hook. Nails lived in old coffee tins labeled by size, and even the extra batteries were sorted into a tackle box with a seriousness that suggested Franklin considered loose AA cells a gateway to national decline. He woke each morning at 5:23 without an alarm because, as he liked to say, after 65, your body becomes either a professional or a nuisance, and his still reported for duty. He would sit on the edge of the bed, test his knees like a mechanic listening for early trouble, slip into his slippers, and make coffee black enough to restore discipline to a room. Then he sat at the little table by the back window and looked out over the yard as dawn came up over the fence line, the tomato cages, the bird feeder, and the small patch of grass where the neighbor's cat held its private conferences with the universe. His wife, Carol, had been gone for almost 6 years, and while he never said the house felt empty, he had developed the habit of leaving the radio on in the kitchen even when he wasn't really listening, which said most of what needed saying. His daughter, Rebecca, lived outside Columbus with a husband who wore expensive running shoes to stand still, and 3 children who all seemed permanently sticky, hungry, or both, and she called every Sunday afternoon to ask whether he had eaten something green, whether he had gone anywhere besides the hardware store, and whether he had finally gotten rid of the old recliner in the den that leaned to one side like it was trying to overhear family arguments from 2009. Franklin always answered yes, enough, and that chair has earned respect. What he meant was, sometimes, hardly, and absolutely not. He was not miserable. He had routines. He had the weather. He had errands. He had opinions on mulch. But he had also become extremely skilled at a kind of solitary efficiency that looked, from a distance, more cheerful than it really was. The interruption came in May at the annual Spring on Main breakfast fundraiser held in the basement of First Community Church, an event he attended only because his old friend Eddie called at 7:02 and said, "Come save me from the Rotary men and their cholesterol stories, Plus, they've got real sausage gravy. Franklin had no respect for false gravy, so he went. The church basement was warm, loud, crowded, and carrying the full smell of biscuits, coffee, syrup, and old hymn books. At the far end of the room, a dozen volunteers were trying to manage sign-in, raffle tickets, coffee refills, and the sort of social traffic that develops when retirees spot baked goods in an enclosed space. Franklin had just sat down with his plate when a woman's voice from across the room said, "Well, that is magnificent. Somebody has relocated the blueberry muffins without due process." He looked up. The woman stood near the raffle table, hands on hips, white slacks, navy cardigan, silver hair, and a pair of reading glasses hanging from a chain. She had the posture of a person who had once run either a school office or a small nation and expected both paperclips and human beings to obey. That was Marjorie Bell. She scanned the room, noticed Franklin noticing the problem, and pointed a paper napkin at him. "You," she said, "you look like a man who can detect where good intentions have gone wrong." Franklin frowned. "That's a broad category." "Exactly. Come help me find the muffins before Gladys decides this is sabotage." He did not usually answer to napkin-pointing women in public basements, but something about her tone was so efficient that refusal seemed wasteful. Together, they located the missing blueberry muffins on the side counter near the coffee urn, where a volunteer named Howard had placed them for visibility, which in practice meant beyond anyone's natural eye line and directly beside the decaf sign. Marjorie recovered the tray, restored order, and said, "Good, you can stay." Franklin said, "I didn't say I was leaving." "Excellent," she replied. "Then we won't have to pretend you were consulted." That was how it began. Not with violins, not with romance, but with muffins, misplacement, and a woman who had clearly mistaken his competence for availability. After breakfast, she recruited him to help move folding chairs back into storage because, as she put it, the younger volunteers stack things like they're trying to start an argument with gravity. Franklin should have gone home.